Welcome to the Paleo Post Podcast. I'm your host, Seth Chaggy, founder of the world of Paleoanthropology. Join us as we journey through time to uncover the secrets of human evolution. Each episode, we delve into the groundbreaking discoveries, fascinating research, and the stories of our ancient ancestors. From the latest fossil finds to in-depth discussions with leading experts, the Paleo Post Podcast brings the past to life. Whether you're a seasoned researcher or just curious about where we come from, there's something here for everyone. So let's explore our incredible human origins together. Well, guys, here we are with episode 2 of season 3 of the Paleo Post Podcast. I am so happy to be here with you. This is one of your hosts, Seth Shoggy. I am joined by Genevieve von Petzinger and Dr. George Nash, our wonderful co-hosts. We are here to bring you the latest in the paleo news. And, we're just going to start out with just a little updates about us, what's going on. As far as me, was just asked to co-author a paper with my undergrad advisor. So I'm pretty excited about that. That's about coming from the Stone Age to AI and how we've used tools to help humans adapt and change, and how we've used tools and basically work on that and its review of the work done on that. And I'm excited very much to be a part of that. And we'll be focusing on that. I'm this close to finishing my degree, and then we'll be looking for a master's program. And then, George, you have a lot of news.
Just a bit.
So I don't, that's most of what's going on with me focuses around my son. Obviously, that's a lot of what goes on. Mm-hmm. But George his son is grown. He has his life. George gets to go and do some crazy things. Why don't you tell us what this thing you did, this realm you entered recently was, George?
I'll start before I tell you that tantalizing bit of information. I'll just say that I am also involved in a actually very interesting paper where I've been working with a colleague of mine, Davida Degan from Israel. And the one thing that's been bugging me for maybe actually 10 years, because it was 10 years ago that I was in Israel. And I was in the Negev Desert, which is down in the south. And I suppose the gist of the paper is basically to understand: are we looking at private space, private rock art? So the meanings of the rock art messages coming out, are they private, or are they for the community? And as you will imagine, there's always a yes and no, and that's the big problem. So we've completed the paper, and basically it's going to be out quite soon. It's going to be in a book, so we're very happy about that. I'm very happy about it because David and myself, we were a writing machine a few years ago, and then there's a bit of a break because of the issues that Israel and the rest of the world churns up. And so it is not only until recently that I've got back involved with writing on the archaeology or the rock art of Israel. So that's very, very exciting. Also, the other exciting news is my book on megaliths, which is Neolithic chamber tombs in the British Isles, is coming out on October the 31st. And I'm just going through the final proofs. But what's been really quite exciting for me, some of your listeners may know, but there's quite a very, very famous international book festival called the Hay Festival. And so I've been invited to give a talk about my book and the stumbling blocks of trying to put together 380 pages of text and about 140, 150 images. And there are some quite funny stories to what I did. So that's going to be out on October the 31st. And then finally, I'm on the on the 2nd of August, just gone. Um, I've spent the last 2.5 weeks, or last 2.5 to 3 weeks in South Africa, in in the dreaded, or the most infamous, cave in the world at the moment, Rising Star, and that's been quite a fantastic sort of experience. The first part of the visit was to be present in a symposium, and then 3 or 4 days later, we were down in the cave system itself. And I'll mention a little bit about that when we come to talk that in detail a little bit later on. So that's been my sort of my last 4 weeks. And then, oh yes, one thing to top up as well is that every year for 22 years, yes, believe it or not, 22 years, I'm one of the co-founders and co presenters and organisers of the British Rock Art Group, aptly named Bragg. And this is our 22nd year, and we organised it in the Kilmartin Valley. And again, there's some really interesting implications there for location, looking at the paleo environment, looking at the very good archaeology we have within the Kilmartin Valley. And again, if those listeners who don't know much about the Kilmartin Valley, it's a glen or a valley right in the western part of Scotland, in near a town called Oban, and it's also the gateway to the Outer and Inner Hebrides, which are a group of islands which lie off the west coast of Scotland. So very, very exciting. That was very, very exciting for me to go there and do that and have a really good look at the archaeology. The archaeology is Neolithic, but as you will imagine, there are histories before the Neolithic monumentality and histories after. So just very, very exciting. So that's me. That's all.
That's all. You've had an
That's all.
awesome time. I just had to point out, I can't believe, George. So your book about tombs and dead people comes out October 31st. It seems somewhat appropriate.
Oh, yeah. I don't know.
It does a bit, yeah.
Yeah.
You could
I was like, that's
make
pretty
it up.
much the perfect publication date for a book about, ancient tombs, which, of course,
Well,
are spooky.
is it trick or
For us
treat?
North Americans with their Halloween stuff, because of course you guys don't have Halloween over there quite the same way.
Yeah. I think it's more of a treat than a trick. I think, Genevieve.
I hope so. I'm excited. Congratulations. That's a huge book. Yeah. I've actually been kind of chilling in this whole late August era, including doing I've been home more than I have been in quite a while. So I actually have been getting to pick apples off my trees, and which of course has led me to thinking about, which I always think about, which is, why is there no fruit? Like, why are things like that not depicted in rock art? It's so interesting. I always wonder that as I'm picking stuff, because they had apples and other, seasonal fruits and things like that. Even during the Ice Age, they did still have these resources. And I get the fact that maybe an apple's not as flashy as some big snorting bison or something, but you know what I mean? Like, it's so weird. So the absence of things, I always think about that I'm like, this must have been such an important time, that late summer to fall would have been a really important time for people living during the Paleolithic in Europe. And yet we don't really have any record of the sustenance that would have kept them alive, basically, probably through much of the winter, since apples store well, and especially, if you tucked them in the back of your cave, it's almost like having them in a fridge. But yeah, so I was thinking about that as I was making apple crisps and being very domestic, while also thinking about the origins of religion, because I'm working on a paper right now about sort of the origins of shamanism, and thinking about sort of the early beginnings of that, and wondering where it came from, as I like to do. And then, of course, I did not physically go with George this time, though I am also a member of the Rising Star team. But I did pre-prepare a talk to be part of the symposium remotely, which was really fun. And so I was kind of setting up because I look at the oldest sort of hominin mark making in the world as kind of my gig. I was trying to help sort of frame out, like, what are we looking for, if we're talking about making marks in the Middle Pleistocene, what does that mean? What should we be looking for? A bit of a survey of the world and that kind of thing. So that's kind of where I've been puttering around, doing that kind of stuff, and then prepping up. Sort of, it feels like the fall is when everything kind of comes back to life. So I'm kind of enjoying the little pause before hammering into my database and other things that I'm planning to do starting at the end of August, beginning of September. So that's me. Well, not nearly so globetrotty. I've been like a little homemaker. It's been kind of fun. I've enjoyed it.
Well, I think we will. How about we go over some news stories and then why don't we have
Okay.
George tell us a little bit more about his time in Rising Star and what he can tell us because and I do want to make something clear because I've seen this posted not always about Rising Star, but about a few things that I've commented. When you're in this field, you are privileged to know certain information that the public does not know. And that's because the public is not ready to understand what that means. It could have implications, blah, 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 blah. The scientists need to show what it is first, and then we disseminate it through science communicators, and then the public knows. So when we say certain things are not published, they're not out yet, we can't talk about them, it's not because, and although this has happened before, it's not because they're hidden and locked away, it's because they're being worked on, and scientists are working as hard as they can to get that information out to the public in a way that's not going to damage the overall view of what's going on.
Mhm.
There have been cases, of course, where fossils have been held and put away. But if you hear us say, like, oh, we can't talk about this right now, it's not because we're keeping secrets from you guys. And it's not us who are keeping these secrets anyway. These aren't our things to tell. And of course, it's just coming from Facebook comments. And I just want to clear things up with a few people. That's how science works. It's not an open thing where everyone gets to know everything. We're working on it. It's something I want to work on. Open science is a big new thing. Do either of you want to comment on open science and how we keep certain things not published, but we hold back a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's an important point you made there, Seth, in that under normal circumstances, there is an issue with, uh, for the good of science and for the good of people who are interested in the subject. I mean, Rising Star is very much sort of locked up. You can't get in there without the permissions from the people who are sort of organising and managing the site. However, the vast majority of sites, now we've got this in the UK, whereby if I was to publicize a discovery, some fool, some idiot would go in there with a spray can or some way of destroying the art. It's happened before, and so I see where we're coming from. The one thing I think is we got to fight as well as a counter argument to that is that for a long time academics have had this sort of idea where they think that they have ownership and
Yes.
they don't,
Yeah.
and they don't. And this is the reason why, certainly Genevieve and myself, we've been very, very strict about this, in that whatever we do academically, we tend to also do public or public things like this, for example, but we also publish in popular magazines, which again brings that message in a readable, understandable way to a much bigger audience, and that's how you keep archaeology going. And the good example of that, I'll shut up in a minute because I know Genevieve wants to speak, but
No, it's good.
about 30 years ago, archaeology was very much a rich person's pursuit, and like I say, things were being discovered. They were never ever sort of publicized. I can remember one rock art site being found from a moor fire on a series of moors in Yorkshire. It was recorded and then buried. No, I've no idea where it is now, but it was buried. So nobody but the excavator had a chance to look at it, and that's what really annoyed me. Really did get on my nerves when I heard about that. And then we had a thing called Time Team, which was a big successful Channel 4 program which basically looked at a site and they would dig it from the Friday to the Sunday and come up with all sorts of wonderful ideas. However batty those ideas were, it really did spark an interest in the public. And really, if you talk to anybody in the UK and also in various parts of Europe, they will remember and know about Time Team, because Time Team had a fantastic persona, had a great bunch of characters working as archaeologists, identifying and uncovering new discoveries, and it was again put over by people who understood what the public wanted to hear and what they wanted to learn about. And believe it or not, at Bristol University, where I used to teach, the head of department, my boss, was a guy called Mick Aston, who was the chap who invented Time Team. And from that point, from 1990, certainly from 1998, when I was employed at Bristol, we had a surge in applications for people to come and study archaeology at Bristol because of Time Team, because the message got across to the general public. So I get both sides of the arguments. I mean, there's things that you yourself, Genevieve, myself, have to keep quiet for the moment because of security. But also the other thing as well, that we only know part of the narrative. Until we get all of the data in, we can't really give that narrative out to the general public because it'll be gobbledygook. Genevieve, over to you, because I know you're desperate to speak.
It's perfect. No, you basically said what I was going to say, which was, I think the big thing is when we're first in the field, that's only part of how we organize and sort our data, right? Like in the sense that there's field work. Often those samples are being collected, things are being done, and it's not, or again, you're doing 3D scans or like whatever it is you're doing, and you're not in a position yet really in the field to do more like when I was in Jordan and I did that kind of that little series, that was about as far as you can really take it in the field, and I was always really careful to be like, this is my on the spot interpretation, or this is what I'm doing, or this is like, but until you can take it back to the lab or back to the office and then connect all the dots and then calmly see, okay, here's what we saw in the field, but archaeology is a job very much with two separate jobs. There's the field work job, and then there's the data scientist job. And it's not until you can bring the field piece back, because that's where you go get the data and then do the analysis. Half the time you might not even actually be sure about what you're seeing, right? Like, and in the moment, you're not necessarily going to be the most useful person because it's almost a little bit speculative. I mean, again, we can take pretty educated guesses about things, but it's still a little bit speculative if we were to do it too much in the moment. We need time to go back, compare with other collections, like look at, all that kind of stuff. So I think that as much as I think it's just maybe even a part of the time we live in, that everybody is used to things kind of being like real time, and that archaeology, real research is slow. Like it can take months to get lab results back, depending on what you're doing. And, it takes time to write things up. It takes time to think it through, discuss with your co-researchers, co-authors, all that kind of stuff. And so I think sometimes there's a bit of a delay, not because we're trying to conceal anything, but more we may not even be quite sure yet what the full implications are of what we found. Or as George pointed out, it is a good point too, which is that unfortunately it's a very small segment of the population, but sometimes when people find out there's a thing somewhere and it has not yet been gated up to close it up, that people do unfortunately go destroy things or do things. And so this is where there's always that little bit of caution with not wanting to announce before we also can confirm it's properly protected. So I think those are all pieces of it. But yeah, I think it's so funny. I was at a barbecue yesterday actually, and I had this really enthusiastic guy who wanted to talk to me about my work, which happens, when we're out in the wild and people ask, and he was really cute. He was good about it, but he did do so there's really no evidence of aliens. I'm not joking. And and I was like, okay, no, there's not. But like, this doesn't mean, again, like I have friends who work with NASA and who are working on, the Kepler, like the exoplanets. Like, for sure. I personally think there's aliens out there. Absolutely. Do I think that they were the ones who inspired early hominins to make art? No. We just never seen it. And that's what I was trying to say to him is I was like, look, we're a bunch of blabbermouths. Like archaeologists are not exactly like we're not that great at keeping our secrets. We try, but I mean George and I are like again, we're always just dying to like, drop little hints and bits. So I mean that's the thing. If archaeologists in our field had found evidence of aliens, everybody would know. There's no way that would be. You know what I mean? So I think this is where it's not that we're trying to be secretive or like, like the gatekeepers, if you will, of knowledge. I think it's more we're trying to be responsible with the knowledge. And that's that kind of balance. And I completely agree with George though that yeah, people used to be way too close-mouthed, and that's not a good answer either. But I think it's a matter of also making sure we don't accidentally steer people in an incorrect direction. So there's kind of like that wanting to make sure we know what we're talking about, because even with us, sometimes in the moment, we can make an incorrect assumption until we have time to go back and contemplate. So there we go. And no aliens.
ET phone home.
Yes, exactly. If we'd seen it, you would know about it. We've seen nothing. So, so go ahead. Seth, I'll leave you. I'm not sure are we needing to do any other WAPA updates, or what are we doing
No,
now?
that we are. I guess the only thing I'll say about that is we are team building right now,
What type of team
and
building?
we are. I don't know. I'll let you guys know, but we're looking for good people who have time to volunteer and may get paid eventually. But right now, we're looking for volunteers for positions relating to social media and writing, I would say. So if you're interested, please email me at paleoanthropology@gmail.com and we can go from there. Now, transitioning to some paleo news, there was a story that Genevieve wanted to talk about that came out 2 months ago about putting a face on what we know as the oldest modern human. Well, he's an archaic modern human, as we call them. And I've done quite a few videos on his skull, so I will link that in the description so you can see what the skull looked like. And I'll also link this article so you can see what the facial reconstruction is. But Genevieve, why do you want to talk about this? Why don't you take us through this?
Yeah. Well, since the Paleo Post Podcast has been on a bit of a hiatus over the summer, I've been squirreling stories away. That's what I've been doing, like the ones that I thought were interesting. And I think even more so, this was a Brazilian researcher who does facial reconstruction type stuff. He's a professor down in Brazil. Last name was Moraes, and he took on the task of, or the challenge, if you will, of he took the data from Max Planck and then used all the reconstruction software to rebuild what the 315,000-year-old skull from Jebel Urud in Morocco might have looked like. And so again, now with all the computer assist, I think we could probably be much more accurate than maybe like an artist's rendition back in the day, right?
Right.
So I think for me, it was almost, funnily enough, it wasn't even so much about the hard science of this as it was more about the soft humanity side of it, in a way of I don't know about you, but like for me, and I'd be interested even what the audience thinks, putting a face on a skull feels different. And I think the type of face we put on that skull is also very interesting. Like back in the day, I'm thinking about how they used to portray Neanderthals, right? And then what, or even do they put dirt on their faces? Like, do you like what once they do the reconstruction, do they make them look dirty?
Right,
Do they
right.
make their hair raggedy? Like, what is it they're doing? And then how does that, for me, anyways, it makes me feel more connected to the skulls. I know
Right.
some of you bone whisperers over there, I think feel quite connected even just with the fossil remains. But certainly for me, I feel like I'm meeting the ancestors in a different way when I can see them. And that will be very shaped by how they've done the reconstruction. And so I think that was where I wanted both of your takes really on what do you think of this reconstruction? Would you consider this to be a good one? Is it accurate? Do you feel like me, like in the sense that that fact that he tried really hard to kind of balance the archaic Homo sapien, the robustness of the skull, but without over accentuating it? Because again, there are modern humans with more robust skulls too. Like it's not, it's not just the super gracile, like there is a range, right? And now, Seth, this is more your area than mine, because I'm not a bioanth person. I've done it as part of my graduate work, but not to your degree. So I guess that was what I mostly wanted, was just, I just thought it was neat. I was curious what your thoughts were on the quality of the reconstruction, and just the importance of maybe introducing these ancestors. I'm even thinking about the older ones like Homo erectus or Naledi, when they do these reconstructions. And then also I was wondering too, like, how do they decide how much fur to put on them? Like I always
Yeah,
wonder
that's
about
always a
that.
great question.
Do you know
People
what I mean?
always wonder that. Yeah,
Yeah, and so
people.
I was wondering that too. So
Mhm.
fill us in. There we go. That was the discussion. I mostly just wanted to have a
Well,
philosophical conversation.
first, I think you bring up a very important point that, again, has recently come up in the social media area involving human variation,
Hmm.
standard human biological variation, what fits in it, what's outside of it, and what race is.
Hmm.
So, we're talking about a human that lived 300,000 years ago. Still a human, still us. It's an archaic modern human, slightly different. Few times 1,000 years later, we're going to be practically indistinguishable. Now, there are humans who look different than we do, the three of us here, and that does not make them any less or more human than anyone else. And the reason for that is because there is less genetic variation between us than there is within groups, even within Africa. Meaning, we are so genetically related to each other that saying race is a biological factor is just little, it's not true, to put it kindly. What we see, the differences that we see, skin color, brow ridge shape, nose shape, are variations caused by changes that we accumulate due to the environments in which we've lived in over periods of time. If you live in an arid environment, sometimes you'll get bigger nostrils. That's just to help the people who live there survive better in that area. That does not make them a different race of people. We are not dogs. We don't work like dog breeds. That's not how it works. I hate it when people use that analogy. Oh, humans are like dog breeds. Very different.
Mm.
Drastically different. And I feel like Genevieve is making that face because she's used that expression before.
No, I never
No?
have.
Okay,
No, I was
okay, okay, good,
horrified. No,
good,
no, I
good.
was more
Yeah.
horrified. I did not know people done that.
Oh yeah, no, people are like, well, oh well, you can mix two different dog breeds together and then come up with something else. No, no,
Oh,
we are we are all the same. We're
yeah. Oh no, I didn't
and
know that. Yeah,
but so back,
I use grizzly bears and polar bears actually.
yes, that's actually what Chris Stringer uses,
Yeah,
and that's how he explains Neanderthal integration as well.
me
Because
too. Yeah.
Roller bears, if
Oh,
anyone knows what that is a grizzly bear that is mixed with a polar bear. And now these are two completely separate species. They are not the same. They do not share the same DNA, but they are able to interbreed and produce fertile offspring, which can make more polar bears, which is kind of how Neanderthals and modern humans work. But
yeah.
that's a whole
Yeah.
separate story. Back to how this guy
Yeah.
looked,
Go back
Jabal
to yours.
Yahud.
Sorry, but yes, just needed to no,
Yeah,
clarify.
yeah,
No,
of
no, never
course.
used dog
So
breeds either, but I didn't
yeah,
realize
yeah,
people done
yeah,
that. Oh my
yeah.
goodness.
So looking at this reconstruction, this is a human. I mean, there's no getting around who this person is. You would see this person walking down the street, and I don't see why there's any reason anyone would distinguish them from any other person that they see. Now, I can see, of course, why white supremacists and other racists could point out certain features and go, those look, quote, primitive. And of course, you also have to remember this is an archaic modern human. they are different. So his brow ridge is a little more pronounced than we would see in modern humans, but I still think it's within modern human variation.
Yeah,
And
for
I
sure.
think this reconstruction is a really good job. The hair is completely interpretive again because
Yeah.
we don't know color. We don't know. I mean, without DNA. Um, the eyes are always very interesting. I find in reconstructions,
Mhm.
people always wonder, and we don't know when our sclera, which is the white parts of our eyes, people or researchers don't know when they turned white in the hominin
Oh,
or primate family group. We don't know when, because if you look at chimps and gorillas, theirs are black.
oh,
And
you're right. Oh my
there's a,
gosh.
yeah,
This is so cool. Yeah, you're making
there's
my
a,
brain just exploded too. That's
there's a
awesome.
hypothesis that our scleras are white so that other humans can know where we're looking. Because it makes it easier to know if you're looking at another human, if you can see the whites of their eyes
And
versus
then you
something
can see
else.
the
Yeah, you can see
direction
where
of
they're
their
going.
gaze.
Exactly.
Oh,
So there's this whole hypothesis about the scleras being white, but we don't know when they would have turned white. So when we see reconstructions of this, I mean, he's a modern human, so his probably were white. But
yeah.
like you were talking about Naledi, for example, I mean, probably had black scleras. I mean, we have no idea, but I mean, yeah, apes don't have white eyes; they have black eyes.
Okay, you're making my brain. I can't believe I didn't know that. That is so fun. This is why it's good to have all the people at the different parts of anthropology. Wow. Now, from a genetic point of view, as we start to sequence further back and get more detailed so the whole genome, I'm suspecting we may be able to answer that question because that would be a chromosomal variant we could probably identify if we can.
Yeah.
Wow. So that is a question, but what a wild thing. But of course, you're completely right. Now that you said it, I was like, oh, yeah. Oh, I love that. That is such, yeah, that's yet another piece of the question of, yeah,
Yes.
especially as you go back to Homo erectus or habilis or the
Hmm.
Australopithecines, right? That you're like, yeah, we don't know, and it's so interpretive. But I think you're right. I mean, it makes sense
Yeah.
with the white eyes, but huh.
So I've gotten a lot of um creationist posting on like, oh, well, that's an ape. Why does it have white eyes and like things like that? Well, actually, that's Lucy. That's a hominin. She might have had white eyes. You know, we don't
Yeah.
know.
Uh,
But anyway, it's a whole different story. But it is a
huh.
very good question that someone at some point will answer.
Mhm.
I don't know when, but
Yeah. Well,
yeah,
genetics is the best. I think that's where we have to remain very open-minded too, because there's just some of the things we just don't have the answers to yet. But I'm so excited. We live in an era where the field is just opening up, and so I bet you that's the kind of question that could be answered probably within the next decade. Maybe we'll get an answer on that one.
I hope that we can provide an answer for Naledi, because the one thing
Yeah.
I'm finding very difficult at the moment is some of the reconstructions, and there have been a number of facial reconstructions for Naledi have been okay, uh, but I don't believe them. The site
yeah,
not quite, they're saying not quite right. It's we in the 21st century, with our 21st century mindset as scientists, we're trying to put Naledi into a almost like a human situation with the burial or the interments, as I call them, the presence of markings and other things as well.
Mhm.
And so from that point, then we should then naturally look at the skeleton, in particular the skull, and think, well, yeah, that it should have a humanoid type skull rather than something which is archaic. And just put that into a context. The context is that between 250 and 350,000 years ago, the Ledi was running around, but so were we.
Mhm.
And that's the strange thing. I just think sometimes that we need to get our contextual perspectives correct. And so the last PowerPoint presentation I had to do actually at the symposium
Mhm.
in South Africa on the 4th of August. I used the most up to date reconstruction of the face of Naledi, and that seemed to be a far more acceptable uh, reconstruction to the ones I'd seen previously, which made Naledi more ape-like. And what I'm trying to do in my own brain is to consider that these people, and they are people, or archaic hominins, are very much like us. They're doing the same sort of things like us, and I'm trying to walk away from the idea that they are more to do with the more of an ape-like hominin to a more human-like hominin, and that's what I'm trying to balance up. I'm finding it very difficult at the moment to do that, only because I suppose because of the way that the stories have emerged over the last 10 years for Naledi, for example. That's just one example.
Mm-hmm. No, it's a really good one, especially because it is more recent then too. So, but I mean, I think one of the things that's so fascinating about our field and also hard to wrap our heads around is that because we're the last ones standing, so to speak.
Yeah, yeah, we are.
We don't know what it feels like to live in a world of cousin species.
Hmm.
And so it's,
Right.
and I think that that's where our brains have a hard time processing somebody that's almost us but not us. Like, do you know what I
Yeah,
like, and I think that's where it that this is part of that question of the reconstructions as well, which kind
yeah,
of
yeah,
fits into that, which is that um the way we reconstruct, the way we imagine and visualize these cousins, these relatives, is going to impact how primitive or how human like we think they are. And it's such an interesting, like, it can be a completely accidental bias, like it's, but it really can change the way we see. And I've often thought about that. I know it's supposed to be a fairly accurate reconstruction of that Neanderthal female. Do you know what I'm talking about?
yeah, yeah, yeah,
Where,
yeah.
but she's got dirt on her face and she's got dreadlocks, hair that looks like nobody's bothered to brush it. And like, so it's got that kind of, like sort of the big, sort of really tangly bits in it. And I wonder though, like, because it makes her look less human, or it makes her look like she is like just lesser, or in some way, because she
Mm.
doesn't take care of herself in the same way. Oh, she's more dirty like an animal. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, it kind of,
Oh yeah, yeah,
so
yeah,
so
yeah, yeah, yeah.
so I think about that sort of stuff a lot, which is that I think it's just so hard for us to imagine these close relatives that aren't us but
Mm.
look like us, right?
But
So
it,
that's, yeah,
but looking at Neanderthals, Genevieve,
yeah,
we are hybrids. As
yeah,
simple as that. You can't take that away. You look at the DNA.
yeah,
We got a little bit of Neanderthalness, and remember that Neanderthal uh, Neanderthalization. What a lovely term. That
it's a
has
good
been
term.
diluting itself over the last
Yeah,
20,000 odd years.
yeah,
From the first when our eyes first met Neanderthal eyes, we decided to have offspring. Um, it's from that point onwards we start to lose one of us, either modern humans, us, or
mhm,
Neanderthals start to lose or dilute, become we have start to dilute our DNA, and that's the reason why we only have 3 to 7% of DNA in modern humans, depending on
yeah,
where we are, of course.
yeah. So,
So it is difficult, and I think in some respects it's probably a political thing,
oh,
whereby
huge, yeah.
we're still outside paleoanthropology and probably outside archaeology. We're still looking at the idea that Neanderthals were not successful, but actually in terms of time, they were more successful than we are.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah. Ours stay tuned, right? Like, the question of Homo sapiens has yet to be answered. How successful we're gonna pull ourselves off to be here. But no, I think that was more like I said, it was almost more of a philosophical, just sort of the way that we portray these ancestors and these cousins and these other relative species, how it can impact the way we understand them and think about them and relate
Mm,
to them. So yeah, and then also how they get used in narratives. I mean, kind of like taking it back to like what Seth was saying, right? And thinking about, race and, different skin color and hair color and things like that, which again are genetically incredibly superficial. and yet become these huge grounds upon which these big, battles are fought, so to speak. So it's interesting also the role of paleoanthropologists, kind of like with Seth there, starting with, breaking that down a little bit and being like, no, like this is not, these are not the things, these are not what we should be doing. This is not how we talk about race. And so I think that's an important part of our job, I think, as well, as science communicators, is to make sure that we are always trying to help people to feel like they can relate, and that visual connection, and always sort of sharing the understanding. As our understanding improves, we're sharing it with others.
Hmm.
So that was my vibe. That was why I wanted to share it. So which one do we want to do next, Seth?
So, coming up next on our list of paleo news stories, and this one wasn't um in the list of the ones we wanted to talk about, but I did want to mention it since we were talking about Naledi. There was a new preprint that came out that did not really hit the news waves, that is over 100 pages long, and addresses quite a few of the concerns of the anti-Naledi teams. They have not yet responded to this preprint. I think it's very important that we still remember this is not a published peer-reviewed paper, but the Naledi team is working towards finalizing, adjusting, reanalyzing, and doing more work. And I think before we go to the story about rock art in Venezuela that Genevieve wants to talk about, why don't we circle back a little bit and have George talk about what he can from his time in Rising Star.
Okay.
George, can I frame it really quickly? I just wanted to say one thing, because I think, and then I'm going to shut up. I'm just going to frame it though for you really quick, though, George. Because I just wanted to say, because I'm the only reviewer, because I did review the preprint on the mark making paper from last year, and I was the only reviewer.
Wait! Like one of the
I'm one of the
anonymous
reviewers. Yeah, I was one of the reviewers. Yeah.
Oh,
I was the only one who, I was the only one who didn't trash the because I treated it, and I think that this is maybe where we just need to define things better, maybe moving forward. But I treated that paper when it came out, like in the preprint with eLife and all that. I thought I put my name on it. I told them they could put my name publicly, but was that what I pointed out was that I was treating it as a preliminary announcement, which was that because obviously there was no data yet. This was more that they were like, hey, we found some marks in this cave, and we think this is what we're seeing. And but I didn't feel like that paper was trying to be like the mic drop. I felt more like it was the opener of the conversation. And so that was kind of how I treated their proposal of there being intentional markings in Rising Star, was more like, this is a prelim, and now, hey, this is what we think we're seeing, this is what we think we're doing. I'm recognizing as well that the team that was working there at the time are not rock art specialists, right? And so that this was them, as intelligent paleoanthropologists in general, but not specifically knowledgeable about the fine tuning of rock art. Kind of like me not knowing about the whites of human eyes. Like again, it's not right. Like we don't we know law. Like I dabble in genetics, but oh my gosh, I would never try and like I would let I would stand back and let Max Planck talk about that or whatever, right? So I think the point I wanted to make was just to frame it, was that when Lee and John actually had approached me and the first art team to come down and look at it, they were very much like coming at it like, hey, can you come share your expertise with us now? Like this was sort of and so I just kind of wanted to frame it that way, which was that conversation was happening like last year. And so, and this is again the slowness of science, right? Because,
Right.
and this is actually when George and our fellow team members from the first art team were just down there in August. That was actually our second trip. We
Mm.
also went last year. We went last September. We were
Right.
in Rising Star doing a preliminary, because again, it's a big, complicated cave system, different context. And so, I think that I just wanted to flag the fact that, results TBD. And George is going to, I think, dance around a few fun, exciting things that we're still trying to understand. But that this has been a process that the first art team got involved, summer of 2023, and that we have been working at it since, and really trying to come at it in a very, in a very systematic way, to make sure that we are doing the science properly, and that we are coming in as the rock art specialists, and really trying to do right by the discipline, and to make sure we are bringing really good data to the public when it's ready to come out. And so that was just kind of what I wanted to frame a little bit, was that, yeah, that it, what came out before was preliminary. I don't know about the big 100-page paper there, but I think that we will, the first art team, as the rock art specialists, and then, in collaboration with the Rising Star team, we will be doing a paper in the future. Once again, we have a chance to sit down and analyze, because when you're in the field, you're just kind of gathering little nuts like a squirrel, and then you got to get it back to the lab and do stuff. So this time around, I hung back and cheered. It was just a little too complicated for me with my kids and stuff for me to come this time, and I wasn't as needed as the folks who actually scrape the scalpels on the walls. And so I was able to participate in the symposium from a distance, do some framing, but let you guys go squeeze through it this time, though it was really fun squeezing through it last time. So I love that. That was the most technical cave I have ever worked in. It was wild to be in there. It was so fun. So, okay, with that said, I will now turn it over to George, but I just wanted to frame that this is a very organized, very well set up. Like, we had critical path analysis going last year. Like, this has been very systematic and very intentional the way we're approaching this, because we recognize the importance of coming up with very solid, good results to finally start to answer the questions that, in my mind, were raised by those preprints last year. So take it over, George.
Yeah. Thanks, Genevieve. Yeah, and I think you're right there. I mean, the one thing is that last September, for people who don't know what we've been getting up to, we were invited last year, thanks to Genevieve, to go out there and do a preliminary sort of investigation of what we could go, where we could go. We didn't actually go into the Delhi Chamber last year, but we did manage to get into Rising Star Chamber, which was a bit of what we call in England a so and so, a bit of a hard one to do. And
it was so fun.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, it was, wasn't it, for you guys?
I had a good time.
But what's really interesting, this year we were invited to a symposium for 3 days, and what was really good was that John Hawkes, one of the co-directors of the project, he's big on statistics, and he said, well, we've produced about 139 papers, or there's been 139 papers published on Naledi and Rising Star, tick, big green tick, and some of the papers are critical. I mean, again, my argument has always been, until you go down there, don't criticize, because it is a different story. I mean, my mindset before I went into Rising Star to when I did go into Rising Star are completely different. So there we are. I went there very much as a skeptic, and I was even a skeptic when we were there on the 3rd of August this year. However, the symposium was really telling, in that all the papers that had been done by bioanthropologists who were looking at, wait for it, teeth, craniums, long bones, and what I was really interested in was vertebra. There's been no criticism at all, because basically Lee and John had pulled in people who knew what they were talking about, probably some of the best researchers in the world who are dealing with skeletal material. And so you couldn't fault that. The big problem we have is that big gap between the physical anthropology and the archaeology. And again, I have issues personally about what I think should be going on, but that's another story. So the symposium was very, very good in that it did enlighten me, certainly, and my colleagues, about the research that's been going on there since 2014 onwards, with the remarkable discovery and uh, condition of the fossil remains that came out of that particular square 2.5 meters by 2.5 meters trenching, which the 6 archaeologists went down there in 2014 to excavate. And really, all we have, really, in many respects, is just a small window on a much larger site to consider. And so the whole idea of the symposium was what we're going to be doing for the next 10 years. And I think John and Lee are happy for me to say that, that we've got to think of a strategy, a long-term strategy about how we are going to look at this for the next 10 years. And I would say for the next 50 years. I think there's so much information which we can glean from the various aspects, the various isms that are coming into Rising Star, the anthropologists, the archaeologists, the geologists, the ecologists, etc., etc. There's so much to say. I think it's not 10 years; it's going to be a lot longer than that. So that was a very useful way, in many respects, of trying to set out the stall about how we're going to be dealing with this particular cave. And I would argue that we've got to start looking elsewhere for Naledi as well. And it's there probably in some of the caves. So when we came to talk, we were on the second day or third day. When we came to talk, it was me and Ippolito who were doing the talk on our preliminary research that the first art team had done in September. We had identified 8 potential panels which needed to be looked at properly, not just with being on site, but also, as Genevieve says, what I would call post site analysis. And I saw, as Genevieve was saying, she did a sort of pre conference video, and she mentioned 3 very important things. Well, one thing which had 3 very, very important components about how marks get down there. We had found a load of marks, but were they by accident? So was it me with my rucksack scraping against the side and scratching, or was it a modern human going down there with his or her pouch scratching, or was it Naledi going down there with tools or a pouch scratching? So accidental. And then there was what we would call guidance markers, where you have particular markers within a very, very complex cave system, which would guide either archaic humans or modern humans through the cave to certain parts of the cave interior, so people could do their things, or hominins could do their things. And in this case, in the Naledi chamber, we've got 15 burials. And the one thing that came out of this symposium is that we are now dealing with 15 females. So for all those skeptics to say the baboons, or they are, the skeletal material so far is mixed, it's not. It's female. And the other thing as well, which Genevieve mentioned, was the idea of ritual. This is the big problem. This is the big, I suppose, the 64,000 Canadian dollar question, which we've got to try and work out. And it's finding that direct evidence between the burials, which they call burials, but I think they're interment. There's a debate in itself, and what we see, what was discovered down there. Anyway, up until around about the 8th of August this year, we still had lots of questions to answer. And so our team went down to the Naledi chamber, and we also went down to Rising Star chamber. Me, the chicken of the group, I stayed in Dragon's Back chamber, but explored quite in detail some of the little sort of offshoots that you get in Dragon's Back. And I'll come to that in a minute. And one of the things we were trying to find out, obviously trying to find the rock art that Ali had identified, and so that needed verification. But we also found things down there which I can't talk about, which are very, very exciting. Really, in many respects, it's really just sort of stop all the critical analysis we have against Naledi and Rising Star, and I think that will come out in due course. I know that we've got myself, Genevieve, and the Rising Star team have got to start thinking about putting together a paper.
Mhm.
And we have a meeting in about a month's time, I think. Well, I'm trying to get a meeting going in a month's time to work out the strategy for that.
Yeah. But
Because
you see,
again,
research is so slow. This is what I'm
I
saying.
know,
Everything's
I
like
know,
we're
I
trying to get
know, I know.
so
But,
I'm
but, but, but
sorry, everybody, but this
yeah,
is the process we need to go through. And there's lab stuff, there's samples, there's things that need to
exactly, yeah,
go through
yeah.
their paces too before we know what we're trying to say, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so when we were down there this time in August, we managed to get samples from certain markings that
Mhm.
were covered with certain natural substances, and those natural substances can be actually dated if we're lucky. So we've got to sort that out. But it should be. I mean, I say it's a very exciting time ahead of us in many respects to get this project done and to see the fruits of our labour. And as I said, I think in many respects, I think we're going to find more stuff down there. But at the moment, it's all in the air as per usual.
Yeah. What do
And
they
once
say?
we have
TBD.
to be
It's all
announced, yeah.
TBD.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
So we've got to work. We're working out a strategy about publication,
Mhm.
and it is hot material. It really is. I couldn't wish for these sort of things to be happening to me at the age I am. I wish I
I
was
know.
30 years younger, so I could crawl through in all those tight spots that my colleagues can do, and I can't. But also, more importantly, it's just an exciting time at the moment to be alive doing this sort of work, this sort of research. And I'm humbled by, first of all, being asked to get involved, and more importantly, to be part of a fantastic team, and thirdly, to be asked by Lee and John, who really have taken the baton, so to speak, and carried the Rising Star dream through from its initial conception in 2014 until the present day, and hopefully for the next 20, 30 odd years.
Yeah. So, oh no, that was beautiful. I'm so glad you're part of the team too. I love it's so fun. It's such a great team. No, I think the big thing is that you know, even if it's a bit controversial and but I mean, Rising Star is such a great challenge in a way. Like it's the perfect just like I said, sitting down and doing like the critical path analysis for it. So that's like for the listeners, viewers, the idea of like it's the if thens, right? So if
Mm-hmm.
this is true, then what do we do next? So,
Yeah,
first
yeah,
of
yeah,
all, like so kind of working our way through, like it was a very perfect example of all of like, just the really good deep questions that we can really dig into that are in some ways reflect the field as a whole, and like how do we throw the most up-to-date science at this, what can we do, like it's so I think that with Rising Star it's a really fun example, and the techniques, the protocols we're using, everything we're doing now are things that can then be applied to other sites afterwards, and so I
yeah.
feel like this is where it's become a good, even I know I recognize there's a lot of controversy and there's a lot of stuff that I mean I'm not enough of an expert to comment on one way or another on other stuff, but certainly it's yeah, it's been a privilege, and it's incredibly it's always fun to go really push yourself too. So the part George is talking about is and you're not a chicken, George, it was very tight. Is the upside down, the turnaround. Oh my gosh, that is a very tight, it was
Right.
probably the tightest caping I've ever done. And so for the listener viewer, I'm going to make your skin crawl for a second. Basically, you have to do a level drop, and you're dropping down in this narrow thing that's not much wider than a human sideways. And you almost have to cartwheel down into it because you're going to have to get down to the bottom where there's like this little hole that's kind of like the undersized, like the bottom of a chair. Imagine that you're basically cartwheeling yourself down, and then you have to jackknife into this hole that's not much bigger than trying to pull yourself around a corner into underneath a chair. And then it's this long tunnel, which, George, you can't even lie flat on your back in that thing. Like you have
No,
to
no.
slightly angle up on one shoulder. It's too narrow. You can't even wiggle on your back. And it's this tiny thing.
And
And it
it's
takes
30 meters long.
and yeah, it's 30 meters long. So,
Yeah.
and that like my that was really funny. I went right after the team lead because it's always better to go sooner. I hate watching other people do stuff like that. I always volunteer. But I was in there and my feet were like half stuck. So you just kind of have to accept the fact you're a little stuck, and then you'll just wiggle yourself around. And I started laughing, and I think the team was probably like, "Is she okay? Is she cracked down there? What's going on?" And they were like, "You okay?" And I was like, "Oh my gosh, this is my job. I have the best job in the world." And then we had a good laugh. And I think that's where, I mean, it's such an amazing challenge and a puzzle, and it's with everything that makes paleoanthropology so fun, right?
Mm.
So
Yeah,
yeah,
but also I think the interesting point as well, Genevieve, is that the entrance into the Dragon's Back chamber from the southern entrance
yep,
is equally as horrid, because
yes,
there's a upside down, and I've done that, and there's two very very tight squeezes there.
yep,
But what is remarkable is that, again, it's just one of my desires. I've mentioned it to the team at Rising Star to do a small test pit excavation in the southern entrance where
mm,
the Iron Age pottery was found, because I believe
mhm,
below there we could be hitting some of the very early evidence for hominin occupation. Because guess what, folks? Most settlements uh, is around the entrance of caves, not in them. And
yep,
I feel that
absolutely,
that's what we should be looking at. And I think that's part of maybe the 10-year plan, that we should start thinking about
yep,
strategic. Uh, and again, it's all through predictive modeling and
yep,
critical path analysis that we've just briefly mentioned,
yep.
to try and work out a strategy for understanding the settlement of either early modern humans or hopefully Naledi. And I'm sure we're going to find it.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, and also keep in mind too that places that are good for people to live have often been the places we think are good. Similar species to us probably also thought they were good, like in
Yeah,
the
yeah,
sense that do you have your water? Do you have like your shelter? Do you have like or the right resources nearby? So I mean, that's where again, that's part of the predictive modeling and trying to figure out where we should be looking and what we should be looking for. So yeah, I think that's the problem is that it's hard to decide when to announce things and what to
yeah,
announce. And I think that's still kind of, I think we're all in the field kind of feeling our way a little bit still, and
yeah,
especially
yeah,
in this more, real time social media era, what does it when and how do we announce? And so kind of there we
yeah.
go. I'm circling back to you, Seth, and what you were saying earlier, which is it's hard. It's hard to decide how much to say when.
I can I
Um,
can I can answer
Exactly.
that. I can answer that partly, Genevieve, because
Tell me.
what Lee and John have suggested, and I think I agree with them.
Yep.
They're going to leave the report writing and the academic papers for what we've been doing down in Rising Star.
Yep.
That's irrespective whether it's a negative result or a positive result. I will
Yep.
whisper that it's the latter rather than the former. Um, they're going to leave it up
Good.
to us. They're going to leave it up. They are, in fairness to them, because we are
Yep.
independent of
Yeah.
the Rising Star team.
Yep.
They've allowed us to carry on and publish what we need to publish. So
Absolutely.
I'm
Yep.
grateful to Mark, to Lee, and to John for allowing us to do that.
Yep.
And of course, obviously, there'll be collaboration, and also more importantly, nothing will get published until everybody's had a look at it and put their input into the paper. But basically, it is an independent piece of work by the First Art team, so
Well, it
which is
needs to
good
be.
news.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and it needs
yeah,
to be. That's the right way to do it. So that's what I mean, is I feel like, you know, whatever maybe fits and starts may have happened at the beginning. I feel like we've settled into we have a good path forward for doing good science. And that's the
yeah.
important thing to me. And so no, I'm so excited about to see what all the sample results are and all the different things you guys were doing, and then how it all, now that again we're in the post process right now.
Yeah, yeah,
So please, yeah, hang in there. As soon as we're able to, and again, as soon as we're able to confirm what some of the things, and sometimes in the field we don't know yet. We're like, oh, maybe this is this, but we're not even all in agreement yet, right? So we need to go
yes,
do
I
we need
agree.
we need to go do the lab work, and then and
Yeah,
also the microscopic work and all the different types of things that we do. And then at that point, once we feel like we have a pretty good consensus on what's happening, and I think again, it behooves us to be responsible with this,
mm,
because this is going to be the in the field actual data piece that hopefully will answer everybody's questions. And
mm.
then but yeah, so please be patient. We're working as fast as we can in a very slow field. So I know it feels like a snail sometimes, but we'll get there.
Yeah. I will just finish. In fact, you
Yeah.
two, that's the work that we're doing, have been doing down Rising Star. It doesn't matter what cave we working in. We've applied the same scientific, hard science techniques to Naledi as we would do with early modern humans, as we've been doing in Spain, Portugal, Israel, and we're going to be doing in Jordan at some point, hopefully.
Yeah.
So these things are tried and tested scientific, rigorous techniques, and we're just applying them to another yet another cave.
Yeah, so it's same protocols, just with the most cutting edge technology we're able to bring to bear on it, basically.
Yeah.
So yeah, so much
Just
fun.
another cave.
Just
another cave. Just another cave.
That's always joke about, hey George, it's like another day in the office. It's the best office ever.
And I do have one thing that I do really want to highlight about something that George said was Naledi has been found in one place.
Mhm.
That is extremely important in understanding what we know about Naledi, and more importantly, I think what we don't know about Naledi.
Yeah.
You can only know so much. Let me just say this. Rising Star is absolutely amazing.
Yep.
The site is stunning. The fossils are amazing. The possibilities are amazing. The way certain things have been handled could have gone better. Now that it seems like the team is regrouping and refocusing on doing the hard science, pulling some things back and going, okay, let's do the work. Let's do the excavations. Let's bring in the archaeologists. I'm really hoping that as a science communicator, it will become easier for me to share the Naledi story with more oomph behind it than
confidence.
With more confidence, yes, with more confidence behind it than when we're just talking about some of the things that have come out before. I think the way that it's not what has been said necessarily, but the way it's been said and how often it has been repeated. I think once, as people of this podcast have heard, and as you've explained, the First Art team, you guys are separate. You're allowed to share and publish your own things. And I think seeing what you guys are saying is very important to understanding the whole story. And that it is very good that the Rising Star team is finally allowing other teams to come in and do work, because before it was only the Rising Star team and that was the only source of information.
Yeah.
So
I will add, Seth, which I think is important, that nearly every major discovery in the last 100-odd years has had its critics. I mean, I'm just thinking about Chauvet Cave, for example. I mean, that got an absolute lambastering from critics about the radiocarbon dating, for example. And I dare say there are other sites as well, formidable sites. I know Leakey had problems, and
Altamira.
Altamira, and it's yes, absolutely, Altamira, yes, of course, 1902.
Yeah.
So in many respects, we've got it's part of that process, and again, I think you've got to be a little bit thick-skinned. I know Lee and John are, and and I'm sure that it'll once all this criticism dies down, we will have a fantastic narrative, fantastic story to tell.
Yeah,
absolutely. I mean, the story's already fantastic. It's just we need more. We need more.
Yeah, we need more. Exactly. Yeah, it's coming. It's coming. So hang in there, everyone.
We'll give you more. We'll give you more.
Yes. We're labbing and analyzing as fast as we can. There you go. I made a new verb, labbing. We're doing it as quickly as we can.
All right. And
yes.
To move on to the final story And then before we do that, let me just ask though, George, do you have any books that you are reviewing this episode out of curiosity?
Actually, no, because I've been away for so long. I've been away for 3 weeks, well, actually for 4 weeks in total, and nothing's come past. If I want to request something, I will do, but I've had nothing come through for the last month. The last book I did was which I talked about, which was the Rock Art of Ukraine, which I've got here, in fact. Which I'm still reviewing, in fact, but it's a cracking book.
Oh wow, I would like
Yeah,
that book. Oh, it's all
yeah,
blurry,
yeah.
but we can get a screenshot for later.
Yeah,
Well,
we'll figure
the
it out.
beauty about it is it's Upper Paleolithic art, and again, it's one of those weird areas of Europe where you
Yes.
thought, well, only uh, Cantabrian Franco areas,
Mhm.
and maybe a little bit of Italy, and now a bit of UK, now a bit of Romania, now Ukraine. So it's quite interesting that everything seems to be sort of suggesting that this is a universal trait, which is going right through Upper Paleolithic Europe,
Mhm.
whereby people want to paint and draw and engrave on walls.
And now I'm going to be super tricky with the segue and say, and moving even out from Europe and into the Americas.
Yeah, 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 exactly. Yeah, yeah,
Let's
yeah,
take a trot down to Venezuela. I want to hear more about the Ukraine. Once you finish reading the book and reviewing it,
yeah,
then
sure.
please come
Yeah,
tell, because that area fascinates me too. We should have like a good deep dive into that.
yeah.
So Seth, may we finish now? Speaking of all these new areas of art where we didn't
Yes,
know art was
let's go
before.
to a new area of art, a previously unknown culture. Let's go
Yes.
back to Genevieve von Petzinger to tell us.
So, well, I
Let's
just wanted to, yeah, like I said, I've been saving up these stories during our hiatus, just the things that kind of caught my attention. I like the fact it's a different part of the world and a different time period, maybe. But also I think fits this bigger narrative of what happens when we look at new places. So this is a story, I couldn't even find an actual published journal article. I found an interview with the principal investigator, whose last name is Perez Gomez, and he is working in Venezuela, which is a difficult spot to be working right now. I was
Yes.
surprised they were still
yes.
doing. I was surprised they were still doing research. That may be why nothing's published. He's at Simon Bolivar University. Um, but he was talking about a series of 20 rock art sites that they've identified so far in the Canema National Park in one province of Venezuela, which of course is an area known for Angel Falls,
Oh, right.
which I believe is the tallest waterfalls known in the world. So it's a very interesting extreme area. This is of course those areas with those huge sort of plateau sort of areas in it. And so this is where this is heavy jungle. Like so with so many of these things, the question is there no rock art there? Or is it that either A, it hasn't survived because of the moisture of the tropics, or B, have we just not found it? Because when you're in that kind of thick bush, like you could miss something that's 5 feet from you. Like that's the problem with
Mm.
these dense regions, which is why I'm in a desert. So simple. Right? Shout out to the Negev and Wadi Rum and Abu Dhabi, all these nice deserts where it's all in the open and it's simple. So this is really neat. They seem to have found this complex of art down there, and of course, one of the things that caught my attention, and be still my paleo art heart. There's lots of geometric signs there. So we've got the usual suspects. We've got crosses, we've got lines, we've got penniforms. We also have lots of patterns of like linear patterns of tight rows of dots and things like that. So lots of interesting stuff. Not dated. So I think this is a pretty prelim thing. But just what caught my attention was I've been thinking a lot. I was actually having a chat with a friend of mine last week. We were talking about Costa Rica, for instance, and
Mhm.
because he's a big fan of Costa Rica. And I was sort of joking that I'm terrible about ever going and sitting on because he was recommending I should go there, and I was like, yeah, but I'm no good at beaches. I'm no good at sitting. You can, next thing you know, I'll be off climbing the cliffs or looking for caves. I'm not good at this whole sitting thing. And then I was like, ooh, but I bet you there'd be rock art down there. There should be, because Costa Rica is literally a choke point to the whole of the like South America, right? And so I
Yeah.
think that with Venezuela as well, I'm just sort of thinking through all of these places where people have not been looking, or maybe they haven't known how old it is, or in this case, he was speculating, well, maybe it's 4,000-ish years old because that's how old this stuff they think is in Brazil. But I mean, George, you've got colleagues working down in those areas where, I mean, they've got art that's for sure Paleolithic. And
Yeah.
so again, this is where there's whole new sections of the world that need to be investigated. And so that was kind of where I just wanted to bring up this Venezuela example, was because the I thought the art was extra pretty because it was geometric signs. And then that idea of a new country where we're finding things, and then that concept of, is this, could this, maybe it is sort of post Paleolithic, but maybe it's Paleolithic as well. And so that was kind of where I wanted to bring it up and see what your thoughts were. Sort of, what are your initial thoughts on this whole idea?
Well, we've talked about this before. I think when you were when I deputized for you, Genevieve,
Yeah.
and I had the pleasure of working in the Capivara in northeastern Brazil.
Yeah.
And there in northeastern Brazil, we've got dates of 27 to 32,000 on rock art, and this is actually indirectly dated, but within the stratigraphy of Upper Paleolithic levels. So quite clearly, unless there's massive big worms and big worm bioturbulation in the stratigraphy, which there isn't, of course.
No.
We've got a good dating range of at least, I think, I remember, about 3 or 4 rock shelters. And we've also got dated rock art in Peru, which is of Paleolithic, and also the stuff that I did in Chile in 2017, which is again sort of 10 to 11,000, 12,000 before present. So quite clearly, that idea of a pre-Clovis tradition, which you have in North America, which is now being debunked, thank goodness. We've got a series of waves of human migration coming across the Bering Straits, going through past good old Canada, bye, and then entering into the United States. We've got Paisley Caves from Oregon, which have dates now of 18,000. We have a cave up in Alaska, which has a ridiculous dating. I can't remember what it's. I think it's called Swordfish Cave. So these things are there. We need just to up our technology and revisit these sites and try and get a better spread of dating. But it's clearly there and clearly Paleolithic in date, if not earlier. There is one site down in southern Chile which has a date of around about 50,000. So I asked the question. I asked the question once. There's a guy called Prouse, who I've got a lot of time for, Brazilian archaeologist. I said, "Where do you think it's coming from?" He said, "Well, it's not south, it's not east, it's not west. It's got to be coming from the north." And he's right. He's right.
Yeah.
And my colleague, head of department, Louise Osterbeck, said exactly the same. It's got to be coming from that wave, or those waves of migration, which go back maybe 50, 60,000 years ago, of modern humans coming into the Americas and colonizing them in various pockets of the Americas. And the Capivara and Venezuela and Colombia, all the evidence is there.
Well, and I'm looking, and those are all adjacent countries too. I was just brought up the map of Venezuela to look, and of course the area you're talking about is below the Venezuela area, right? So this is again, and it's not too far above there that we start getting to that choke point through Costa Rica and Panama down there. And that was actually one of the things I noticed, because of course, what do paleoanthropologists do on Saturday night? We go down rabbit holes, and I started looking for paleo-environmental data on Central America after thinking about it. And there's so little. Like, you don't realize how poorly documented that. Like, I was having a very hard time finding anything about what Central America looked like during the last glacial maximum, because I was like, well, I wonder how far out. Like, I managed to find some stuff on the shelf, so I could kind of see probably where the submerged coastlines were and things like that. But you realize how little has been done. And I think that's so often the story that we're dealing with here, like every week, is that it's these little bits and pieces that we start to just add these. It's like puzzle pieces, but like on the most ridiculously huge puzzle. And so we're just putting little tiny puzzle pieces in. So that's, I think, for me, the Venezuela story was just like, oh, look, another example in yet another country of, probably what is, I guarantee there's probably several traditions, especially knowing the multiple waves of migration that we're moving through there as well. So that was all. I just wanted to bring it up.
I'll just add an MB note. The MB note is that in the Capivara in Brazil, northeastern Brazil, they have their painted images of modern humans dancing around trees. So we talked earlier on about plants.
Yeah.
This is one of only maybe a handful of rock art areas around the world where plants are portrayed on the rock art.
Wow. Okay, yeah, that is really unusual.
And
Like
what
almost unheard of. Yeah.
yeah, what I'll do, Seth, I'll send you an image so you can send around to listeners
Yes.
of that, because I've got some absolutely fantastic pictures of that. Because I was amazed when I saw those images of people dancing around trees.
Oh, that is so neat.
Absolutely.
I want to see that
Yeah.
too. Yeah, now I need to see it. Okay, perfect. There you go. So those were my thoughts. That was all I had to say. Like I said, I just wanted to flag it because I thought it was interesting. And see, look at the cool
and
things
of
we learned.
and of course, absolutely it is. And that's the thing. You listen to the Paleo Post podcast, you learn new things.
Yep.
And at this point, I'd like to just say, everyone, this show thrives off of you guys sharing it, liking, subscribing. We need you guys to rate the show if you listen on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, which is now on the web, by the way. So I don't believe you need an Apple account to listen to Apple
Ooh.
Podcasts. It's just online. So you can access us there. You can access us on YouTube anywhere you want. I think that about does it for this episode. I think we'll wrap up. It's been a little bit of a while of an episode. Hopefully you guys learned a lot, enjoyed. I know that we talked about a lot of things, so I will have a wrap up of what we talked about during or in the description, and I will make sure that we share this around when it comes out. Again, these will be coming out weekly starting in, I think, what did we say? The first episode's coming out September,
Beginning of September. I don't know what day you
beginning
want
of
to pick,
September.
but
Yeah.
Yeah,
that's
okay.
that feels
So we'll
right.
start in September and we'll have these out weekly. So just if you want more, if you like this content, we're going to keep trying our best to make it. But really, it's free for you guys to do, but it does a lot for us if you just share, subscribe, and like. So thank you all so much. We hope you learned something. This is Seth signing out. I'll leave the other two to say goodbye. Have a great weekend.
Yay, science!
Live long and
And
prosper.
my brain's still blown about white eyes. I'm going to go think about that now. I learned too.